All right. Well, I want to welcome everybody to our second episode here of Community of Wisdom Seekers. And sharing his wisdom with us today is Clint Parker. And Clint is talking on shame shattered by amazing grace. And I'll tell you, I've got to know this individual over the last many months, about a half year now. And he has just an amazing story to tell. And I have challenged him to tell that story here in about 20 minutes. And I think he's going to do a great job. And we're excited to hear it. And I will tell you, there's just so much beauty in his story, a lot of pain, a lot of heartache at the beginning, but just seeing how God has redeemed him and how he's using him and has used him. And really excited about his future and really what God has for him. He's in a great place, and where he's moving is even more exciting. So with that being said, I met Clint on a call for basically an opportunity to show him what Faith to Influence does. And those of you that don't know, I work for them, and they work with Christian men that are in sales and entrepreneurship. We do 3-day retreats, and he was checking us out just to kind of see what we had available. And he felt God stirring in his heart to just reach out, and he did. And we had a great conversation initially, and from there he decided to come out to a retreat, which he just got back from about a month ago. And so I think that'll be a part of his story as well that he shares today. So anyways, that's how we met. And then we just been meeting almost weekly, and we've become really great friends. And I'll tell you, this guy is just a loyal dude. He's just somebody that's firm in his friendship, and I can just see that in the way that he just carries himself. And anyways, I'm just really impressed with you. I love you, brother. And I'm going to go ahead and let you have the stage.
All right. Thank you. And I'll say thank you to everybody that's joined tonight. And I appreciate being on here. And I see Patty and Steve Sykes on there, and they just introduce them real quick. They were a set of house parents I had at Cornhuskers. And so I'm glad to see them. So I'll start. First of all, I was born down in Southwest Kansas, down in Liberal, and lived down there for a while. I was there for till my 7th grade year in junior high, and then moved to Nebraska for a while at the children's home. I was there till my junior year in high school. Moved back down to Oklahoma, where my dad lived, and finished out high school down there. So as a kid, my mom was a single mom, and she had 2 boys that were we were 10 months apart, so we're pretty close in age. So we were a handful at the time, and she worked 2 jobs. And so she had us the babysitter, and eventually we got to just start staying with these people, JD and Sharon Houseman. And eventually they became mom and dad to us. So our dad was an alcoholic and wasn't around for probably the first 5 years of my life. And our mom, like I said, single mom, just 2 jobs. And so she didn't have a whole lot of time for 2 toddlers. Our mom did have several relationships, and the men that were in her life when we were around, that's a lot of it had to do with men who just weren't very good men, and they were abusive. And my brother, my sister, and I were exposed to abuse and a lot of bad things. Where the Housemans, where they provided us a home and some love and support, and gave us some structure, introduced us to God. And that's kind of where my faith comes from, is, at a young age being introduced to God and who he was. And so really tonight I want to talk about a lot of the shame that I carried in my life, and what it caused, and the havoc and stuff like that. And it really started at a young age. It started my brother and I were really exposed to porn at a very, very young age. At 3 years old, I can remember to this day some of the exposure that we got to pornography, and some of the other things that my mom and her boyfriends showed us. So that started some really shameful thoughts, where, you know, a young boy who sees things like that, and you start thinking, and you kind of wonder, why are you thinking this way? I really shouldn't be thinking this way. And really, honestly, I can remember a dream that I had when I was 6 years old, and I was too afraid to tell anybody because I was too ashamed of the dream. I was like, I shouldn't really be dreaming these kind of dreams. And so I held that really in for all those years. And then honestly, I first got addicted to porn at 7 because of all the exposure. And then I started wanting to see more and wanting more. And those thoughts went from, you know, I don't want to see that to I want to see that. And so I carried that with me for a really long time. And that shame continued and went on into really into my teenage years. And and then it just kind of spiraled after that. So when I started really rebelling, I was about 11 or 12, and started to hang around with kids on the streets, and we'd go to stores and steal and try to just, you know, just do stupid things that try to get what we could get away with. I actually got arrested for the first time when I was 11 years old, and got handcuffed and walked through the store. And when, of course, then I also ran away from home. And this was all, I was still, at this time, I was still living with Sharon and JD Hausman. My brother and I had moved out with our dad in 5th grade, and that didn't work out for me. So I moved back with the Hausmans, and I was living with them. But I started kind of getting out of control and just rebellion against had a lot of hate and a lot of pain because, you know, my parents, I didn't feel like I really belonged anywhere. Didn't feel like anybody really loved me, and that I really, you know, anybody really wanted me. And started smoking cigarettes, started doing drugs, you know, at the age of 12. A neighbor introduced me to marijuana for the first time. So really a lot of bad choices as a teenager. And then ultimately I got to spend the night in jail at age 13 for stealing a car and taking a joyride. We tried to outrun the police and wreck the car. And so at that point, my parents didn't know what to do with me, and nobody really had any clear choice of what to do. And the house knew some people who were running the children's home, and so that option came up, and I was offered that option and took it. So at 13, when I was between my 7th and 8th grade year, I got to go up to Cornhuskers, and I can remember you know, I remember the day that I got there, and they asked me if you know, they told me the rules and told me what I was going to have to do, and asked me if I wanted to stay and comply with those rules, and my answer was yes, because I needed that stability. So it was something I was looking for and I didn't have. So, and that honestly, the house parents that I had, they offered support. Everybody up there offered godly support, and that's what they lived a godly life. They just didn't talk it; they lived it, and they treated each one of us like we were their kids, and they gave us love and compassion, and I really contribute my life turning around at that point to the children's home and everybody that was involved, because they gave me more stability than what I had before. So I got baptized at 14, and I still remember that day. And it's funny. I reached out to the gentleman that baptized me when I started looking to reading my book or writing the book, and I found out he had been raised in the children's home, and so a lot of pieces together where you don't really see that until later on in life. And how really in the season, and I know I went through that, or what that was, what reason that was. So Cornhusker, we lived out on a ranch. We got to work. We got to ride horses. We went to public school, but there was two cottages that each had 8 boys in it, and a cottage that had girls in it, and we were just like one big family. We connected real well, and I still am Facebook friends with a lot of the kids and all the house parents, and so we have that connection that really helps. Sorry, I'm looking at a timer. I keep trying to keep time. And then so after my sophomore year, my dad decided I needed to come back home, and so he moved me back to Tyrone, and I finished up my junior and senior year in Tyrone. And then once I got back with my dad, he really kind of made me feel like I was still that teenager that was always doing something wrong. He put a lot of rules on me that I had that my brother didn't have, and he would tell me, well, I'm just trying to keep you out of trouble. And I'm like, well, I'm not that way anymore. And he was kind of against me going to church. He wanted me to work every day, and so I kind of had a battle with him a lot, and there was still a lot of back and forth that never went away. And after I moved out, our relationship was really broken for a long time. And then shortly, I found out after I was 18 that he wasn't my biological dad, and my biological dad was didn't know who he was or where he was at, and so it actually took about another 10 years before I even met my biological dad. I went back to my mom, and so there was a lot of pain there between my mom and me, and my dad and me, because of the way my childhood was. And then of course when I grew up and as an adult, a lot of I still continued to hold that shame as a child. I felt that shame of not being good enough. I felt the shame of the sin that that I watched the movies that I watched, and that I saw the things that I saw, and a lot of just deep down pain that I just couldn't really share with anybody. I just felt like I couldn't tell anybody because that would just totally change the way they looked at me. And I knew that I wouldn't be accepted, and so I I tried to be a people pleaser, and try to just do everything I could for people just so they would accept me, and that would in turn cause more pain, because I really was just not being myself, not being who I really wanted to be. Um, and then I kind of found myself continuing the cycle of my parents with my children, bringing women around my kids. I got married, got divorced, and all due to the fact that, I've always felt like, well, I'm not happy here, so maybe this person will make me happy. Or I'm not happy here, so maybe this person will make me happy. And just continue to have several different relationships, uh, affairs, and a lot of um, things that that you just you hold inside, and you think, I can't really ever tell this to anybody, because if I do, nobody will really respect me, or nobody will even really want to be around me. Um, so a lot of broken relationships. I had a hard time trusting people, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that I couldn't trust myself. So I brought that pain into each relationship. And so I couldn't trust anybody because I knew that deep inside, I couldn't trust myself. And, uh, I tried to find love through sex, and we all know that that's not the answer. You don't find love through that kind of relationship. And, you know, I, and of course, hiding that shame led to addictions, and addictions led to depression. Actually, in 2016, I went through a pretty heavy depression. Um, just couldn't get out of bed. I had to physically make myself get out of bed every morning, and I'd make it to the living room. I'd go to sit down on the couch, and I'd just break down. Um, and it just, I would get in the truck and I would break down, and it just every day was so painful because I was hiding and holding in all that pain, and not telling anybody. Um, and that was about the time I started writing the book, and I was putting a lot of this down on paper, but I still wasn't telling anybody. A lot of this was down on paper, but it was still, there was things I was still holding back that I'd never told anybody. And so I'm just like, that's always in the back of my mind, always thinking. And so, suicide was an option that I thought about in 2016. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. So I'm either going to end my life, or something's got to happen. And at that moment, I just, I just said, God, I can't do this. I'm done. I can't take on any more pain, and can't do it anymore. And slowly he would show me and he would take some of the relief that I would be under pressure, under work or something, and things would just resolve without any, it would just resolve. And finally I was just like, so, I started getting back into prayer, started, getting back into reading my Bible and studying, and that made things better. But I still had the pain, I still had the shame. And so, once I figured out that, maybe I need to do something different. Then uh, then kind of started hitting to me. I needed to find godly men who can give me godly advice, who I can share with, and who are open and honest. Because when I was at Cornhuskers, that's when I was able to share and open up and not have that judgment. And and I can remember that time in my life being one of the strongest as my Christian faith was right then as a 16-year-old. And I would think as a 32-year-old, I was like, why was I stronger in my faith at 16 than I am 32? And it's just because I let, once I got away from the environment, I let all that pain start coming back, and started really believing that I wasn't worth that anymore. And I didn't feel like God loved me. I felt like I had to I had to go to church 3 days a week. I had to do this, I had to do that for God's love. I didn't understand what grace really meant until He opened up my heart and said, none of that matters. What matters is that you believe in me and that you trust in me and that I love you. So, and that you're my son. And I really, that opened up, I didn't realize. So, um, in Kings 8:39, it does say, "For you alone, God knows every human heart." Um, you know, God doesn't hold our sin against us. Once we ask for forgiveness, it's gone. And I would ask for God's forgiveness, but then I'm like, but I still sinned. I still did this. And He knows us and He loves us, and He knows our whole story. So um and for anybody that feels like, I'm not worthy enough to have that kind of love, then you really are, because God He does a lot. And when I went to Faith to Influence a couple of weeks ago, went to the retreat, and honestly, I was going to the retreat for a whole another reason. It was to get clarity on something else. Um, and we were first day we were there, and everybody was kind of sharing why they were there, and the reason that they came, and what they wanted to get out of the retreat. And it just it just hit me. Each story, God just, from each person, God told me, you see, you're not the only one. You're not the only one. And I love that person, and I love that person, and I love that person, and I love you. And He took that pain, and ever since I've been back, there's been struggles, but it's different. That shame is totally gone. That shame is like, it's like I don't even, He erased it from my mind. And so part of it is having that community with men, with Christian men, and surrounding yourself. Iron sharpens iron. And so you've got to really surround yourself with like-minded people, and Christian men and women both. I try to I try to just not separate myself from my old friends. I still have friends in liberal and stuff, and I talk with people, but I try to put myself with people who I know can build me up and I can build them up, and we can trust each other. And yeah, as Patty says, because of Jesus, we're family. So, so how are we doing on time?
Yeah, I think that's a great stopping point, Clint, if you're all right with that. And we'll go ahead and just dive in and see if anyone does have anything they want to say. And I know you have some people on here that may have a few things to say. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the ability to unmute yourselves. I think here, let me see. There we go. So if anyone does have a question, or if you just want to give some feedback, you're more than welcome to do so. But I do want to say thank you, Clint, so much for sharing that. Multiple times you're making me get a little emotional, and just seeing you be who you are and true and vulnerable, and your authenticity is it's just great. And I think for me, it's the power that you have in your testimony and your story moving forward, and how many young men need someone like you and your story and your book in, you know, in their life, in our world, that are holding on to these things you held on to for so long. And it's so cool just to see what's possible, and just to encourage you to continue to move forward and lean on to him and trust him. And it's cool to see how far you've come, and how transformational it's been. Just even
Yeah, absolutely.
for sure.
One of the things that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
This is Patty. One of the things that has helped me over the years is I went to the Butterfly Palace in Branson one time, and there was this gorgeous butterfly. And the guy who worked at the palace said, "Do you know why that butterfly stands out?" And I said, "No, explain it to me." He said, "We have watched that butterfly have the biggest struggle, the most in and out of that cocoon, could not get out of the cocoon, worked on it, worked on it, worked on it. And finally, when that butterfly came out of that cocoon, gorgeous."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I see in you, Clint. You have had quite a struggle, but God has been there the whole time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
And, you know, I look back at that. So, yeah.
Thank you for persevering. Thank you for enduring. And thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you. And Steve, you know, that's, I contribute my, my ability to go back to God and to be here, to the Sykes family and everybody that was involved with the children's home, because that's, you know, if it wasn't for that, I would be in a lot different place right now. You know, a lot different.
Well, we are so thrilled to be part of this. Actually, as you all may know, there's always some kind of an emergency in ministry, and Steve has had to step away because of an emergency. And he so much wants to be a part of this, so he will be back shortly. If not, he will get to view the rest of this online.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Patty. And yeah, you're an inspiration to myself, and Clint, you as well. You know, I know we've had conversations about what God's been putting on my heart, you know, with just working with individuals in your space, and being there for those that didn't have that counsel and that guidance and that male leadership and that male role model. And, you know, your story does inspire me to move forward, and Patty, individuals like you, to create stories like this. And thank you so much for the beautiful picture and imagery with the butterfly. And it's so true. And it's actually right before we hopped on the call, Clint, it's almost exactly like what our prayer was, which is right, how God works.
Yeah.
Very much in alignment.
Yeah.
So, cool.
God does that.
Amen.
He does. And it's, you know, it's, I think about all the times that, you know, I was struggling and where I was at, and honestly, there was times where I was just hiding. I was hiding from God and hiding from everybody. I put a smile on my face, but I was hiding. And it wasn't until I came out and I said enough, and I started opening up to people, and you know, the conversation that you and I had, Daniel, for Faith to Influence was, you know, I just told myself, I said, I'm gonna overwhelm this guy. I'm gonna, you know, we're gonna get into it, and it was at a point where I was just like, if it doesn't change now, then it's not going to be good for me. And I just had to be open to let God work. And a lot of times we feel like we need to do it ourselves, and we cannot do it ourselves. We have to have God do it. And that's the only explanation I have is God's the only one that did what he did, and put that joy back in my heart. And did what he was just waiting for me to open up and accept it. But we do have to accept it. That's the thing, is we do have to accept it, because he's not going to force it. He's not going to force anybody to do anything. And if we don't accept his love and his gift, and it's on us. So
awesome. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording here, but we can hang on. We got 5 more minutes. But thank you for joining us, everybody, and we really appreciate it. And once again, Clint, appreciate you for just opening up. We know that just this story and just this recording can really help so many that are in need. And so what I'm hearing is share it, find community, and let God do what only God can do. So thanks again.